ready to fly. They look scared, no, they don't really want love. Get ready to fly.
TNA iMPACT released all the way back in September 2008 for PlayStation 2, Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. We'll be checking out the PlayStation 3 version today. The game was developed by Midway Studios Los Angeles and published by Midway Games. Many of the folks who worked on iMPACT would also work on the excellent WWE All-Stars after Midway filed for bankruptcy, and before iMPACT, the development team worked on the Backyard Wrestling games as Paradox Development. Let's not also forget that Midway were responsible for WrestleMania the arcade game, but of course it was a completely different team within Midway who brought us that delightful arcade fighter. So iMPACT does tie in with other pro wrestling games that you might have already played. An IGN article from way back in 2005 states that EA and Rockstar were in talks at one point to develop TNA iMPACT, but TNA ultimately went with Midway. You can only imagine what a Rockstar wrestling game could look like, but it wasn't meant to be. TNA iMPACT would try to offer fans an alternative to Yuke's SmackDown vs. Raw 2008 that would release shortly after TNA's debut game. By this point, the SmackDown games were definitely refined, but some would argue that they were also getting, well, a little boring and a little repetitive. So TNA iMPACT had the potential to excite players with something new and something different. There was definitely potential here, and you'll see this through the behind-the-scenes clips featured in the game. Characters' faces and bodies were scanned, with Midway wanting wrestlers to look authentic as possible. Multiple wrestlers were also brought in for motion capture, and you can just tell that the team were very enthusiastic about putting this game together. At least that's the impression you get when watching the development clips. Boot up the game and you'll get an excellent intro video followed by a very clean menu system. The roster includes 17 wrestlers you can choose from right away, along with 14 unlockable wrestlers. Additionally, there's some original characters that are unlockable made specifically for this game. Right away though, you can pick from AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, Kurt Angle, Sting, Christian Cage, Booker T, Hernandez, Homicide, Rhino, Sharkboy, Robert Roode, Scotty Steiner, Alex Shelley, Christopher Daniels, James Storm, Chris Sabin, and Brother Devon. To unlock everything in the game, you'll need to play through story mode and also accumulate style points. And as you play through the game, along with the wrestlers, you'll also unlock venues and new moves for Create a Wrestler. Mike Tenay, Curryman, and Petey Williams were downloadable characters for the game too. And one of the original characters that was unlockable in TNA iMPACT was Afro Thunder from the Ready to Rumble games. Unlockable TNA wrestlers included Brother Ray, Abyss, Eric Young, Low Key, Jeff Jarrett, Kevin Nash, Sanjay Dutt, Tomko, and Jay Lethal. The late Don West was also a playable character. We're going to look at everything the game has to offer, including the whole story mode, but let's get straight into the ring first of all, and I'll show you how to play TNA iMPACT. It's a little unconventional. Standard kicks and punches are performed with the X button and the square button. The triangle button lets you perform what the game calls a power move. You have a few at your disposal depending on if you press the button on its own or if you walk towards or away from your opponent. If you want to lock up, you need to hold the modifier button, and this is where I think TNA iMPACT gets it a little wrong. We'll come back to the modifier in a moment. From a lockup, you can strike your opponent, perform an Irish whip, or pull off your finisher. You can do finishers once your impact meter fills up. So just to recap that, you need to hold the L1 modifier button, press the triangle button to lock up, and then press O to perform the finisher. That's quite a few button presses for something that should be pretty simple, you know? The modifier button's used to also pull off stronger punches and kicks, and this also comes into play when running or trying springboard attacks. So if you want a springboard, you're going to hold in R2 to run, L1 for the modifier, and then press the face button to execute the move. Picking an opponent up from the mat, yeah, you're going to have to hold in the modifier button for that too. It's a mess in terms of controls, but you will obviously get better after playing more matches, and the control scheme will soon become second nature. But there's also buttons on the controller not used for anything at all, so it makes you wonder why Midway Studios LA went in this direction. R1's your counter button, and the timing is fair for counter moves, but be warned, the CPU likes to reverse a lot, especially on harder difficulty levels. Circle's your general action button for getting in and getting out of the ring, performing specials, tagging in your partner, and yes, you hold that modifier in too, just the tag. It's not great in terms of controls, but again, you will get used to it eventually. Finally, there's a stun meter too. Deplete this to stun your opponent, giving you a chance to do some serious damage without having to worry about getting countered. Do use this to your advantage though, because when you up the difficulty level, timing stun can secure you victories. So how does it all flow and how does it actually play when facing opponents? Let's set up a few matches and I'll talk about some of the pros and some of the cons. I remember thinking at the time that TNA iMPACT looked really good. The graphics for the time were great. Character models looked especially good. The arena lighting in the impact zone is very vibrant, and even if it doesn't match what we see on TV, it still works for a video game. Entrances feel a little incomplete unfortunately. We only see the wrestlers make their way to the ramp before it cuts off, so that's a shame. But overall, the atmosphere and match presentation in TNA iMPACT is good in my opinion. Playing the game itself, it's not as bad as what others make it out to be. There is a learning curve to this game and it can be frustrating at times. You're going to deal with some dodgy hit detection with your moves and actions just failing to do anything even though you're in the right position. You also have that modifier button to contend with where you'll have to train yourself to use it when needed, which is unfortunately around 70% of the time you're actually playing a match. But overcome these things and there is a game here that again isn't as bad as what others would make you believe. I get the feeling that loads of the video reviews you see online are from people who play the game just to capture enough footage for a YouTube video and then they repeat statements from deep in the echo chamber. TNA iMPACT is not perfect, far from it actually. It can be quite frustrating to get to grips with because most actions require additional work, and when you compare this effort to the usually straightforward controls found in the SmackDown games, then it makes iMPACT look even worse. But I really don't think iMPACT's that bad once you spend a decent amount of time with it. Something I really like about the game is the aerial attacks. High flying moves look spectacular in TNA iMPACT. Picking the smaller guys and jumping around the ring is a whole lot of fun, but again, the CPU will counter you a lot, so be careful. General grapple moves are seriously limited, but the ones that are here look good. Submissions are handled quite well with a QTE system, although they're not very important. CPU logic during multi-man matches seems to be on point. And another thing I like is the style system that's been put in place. Basically, you're going to get style points for pulling off certain moves, but if you pull off the same move too many times in a short time span, then you'll get less points. It's the kind of game that Davey Boy Smith would absolutely hate, but this forces the player to try and change things up. Style points are used for unlockables, so this isn't just a random score you'll get after completing matches. Having varied wrestling matches will help you unlock stuff a lot quicker. The problem here though is the TNA iMPACT has limited move options to begin with. Spamming the same moves can happen completely unintentionally because you don't have that many choices anyway, especially when it comes to grapples. So you'll want to try and change things up and only go back to the same moves once a little time's passed. All in all, I think there's just as many positives with iMPACT as there is negatives, and while this doesn't make for a great game, it also doesn't make for a terrible one. In terms of playable matches though, there really isn't a whole lot here. You can have singles matches, tag matches, submission matches, falls count anywhere matches, fatal 4-ways are available too, and we've also got the Ultimate X match that is good, but it could have been better. It's a nice diversion from standard matches, and it's good that one of TNA's signature matches got included in the game, but there's not a lot to it really. Climb up, try to grab the X by pressing the button at the right time, and also make sure your opponent doesn't grab the X by pulling him down from the ropes, kicking him down while you yourself climb up, or performing diving attacks. Honestly, you'll quickly learn how to win these every time, and it's way more suited to multiplayer. Online play was once available, but there were two common complaints with playing against others around the world. One, players couldn't use created wrestlers, and two, if you paused the game and quit out of the match, it wouldn't get counted as a loss. Folks who played TNA Impact are going to remember story mode quite well, and that's not because of what you do in story mode, but rather because of the character you play as. Suicide was an original character made just for the game, and this is the guy we're going to take from the minor leagues all the way up to the main event. But what's noteworthy about this is that this video game character would also become a real wrestler on TNA television following the release of the game. Let's take a look at what he got up to though in the TNA Impact story mode. The thing I remember about story mode was just how good the cutscenes looked, and I'd even say they were better than the WWE's offerings at the time. Cutscenes feel a bit more cinematic here in TNA Impact, and it would remind you of Def Jam Vendetta and Def Jam New York story mode in terms of how it's presented. Our guy, who we're going to call Sue from this point on, so YouTube stupid bots don't think I'm talking about something else, was once on his way to the top in TNA and he got himself a title shot. LAX, however, wanted Sue to job out and lay down on the mat. Sue went ahead and he won the TNA championship, so LAX decided to wreck our hero and try to put him out for good. Sue went missing. He woke up to find himself in a rundown a medical facility in Mexico, and he only has to deal with Mexican Mike Tenay and Mexican Don West performing surgery to get him back on his feet. After this cutscene, we're brought to the main menu and we don't have a lot of choices. We can continue story mode or modify our look and moveset. I'll go in here though and fix our character up a bit. Yeah, no one will ever know. So Sue becomes Doink Hogan. He's forgotten everything about himself, but he has this unwavering desire to bust heads. So he gets in the ring and he becomes the king of the Mexican gauntlet match when he defeats local heroes El Grosso, Nightwolf, and Fernandez. Doink Hogan is clearly not a guy you want to mess around with, especially if he can beat these main eventers so easily. From here, you get an opportunity to cross the border and get an indie match at an armory. James Storm appears for a match too, and if you can beat Storm, you'll get a chance to wrestle at a TNA event. At this point, Doink Hogan still doesn't realize he's really Sue. He thinks he's an all-American hero, and he sometimes gets these feelings that things won't work for him, brother. Sue arrives at the Impact Zone with another bunch of jobbers. Kevin Nash organises a few matches, with the winner getting a match against Jay Lethal. Defeat Lethal and you can hang out in the TNA locker room and get yourself a guaranteed match on television. Gotta say too, Jay's character model looks great. After competing these empty arena matches and after Kevin Nash lets you stay in the smelly Impact Zone dressing room, you'll go on to beat Robert Roode and Jim Cornette will sign you to a TNA deal. That was pretty quick. But then some bozo who calls himself Beardy McGee, not making that up by the way, smashes your head against the ring post a few times and he tells you to watch your back. Big Kev thinks you could do with a tag team partner, so he's enlisted Eric Young as your new best friend for life. This leads to a few tag team matches against the finest jobbers TNA has to offer, including Beardy McGee and a guy who calls himself King Tat. So even though Doink Hogan's already made some enemies, at least he's got himself some stable work. You'll eventually beat the Dudleys and Eric botches a promo while Christy Hemme reveals your tag team name, the Salty Biscuits. And for some reason, you go back to wrestling jobbers after beating Devon and Brother Ray. Eventually, you'll win a pretty tough match against AJ Styles and Tomko, but then you get jumped by LAX again. During this beatdown, Doink Hogan starts to remember what happened to him, but he doesn't remember all of it. Big Sexy then books you on a tour of Japan, and it's at this point you start getting seriously fed up with wrestling tag team matches. In Japan, it's more of the same. More tag team matches, only this time it's in front of a very polite audience. Give the developers credit here, this is quite the attention to detail. In Japan, you'll face more jobbers along with Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin, the Motor City Machine Guns, and then Big Kev gets you a title shot against LAX. If you lose the match though, you're going to be forced to break up with Eric Young, and it's maybe the one time Doink Hogan wanted to do the JOB. So you go back to the Impact Zone to face Homicide and Hernandez. You win the belts, but then a shadowy figure sends the Fallen Angel and AJ Styles down to beat you up. Eric ends up in hospital, so you forfeit the belts after like 10 seconds. And Daniels talks about paying for your sins or some nonsense, I don't know. So now it's all about finding out who this shadowy jagoff is while going back to singles matches. Next up, you join TNA's X Division, and it's more jobbers. Even El Grosso's made it to TNA. After unlocking Sonjay Dutt, you'll once again run into Christopher Daniels, and he tells Hogan to abide by the fallen angel and whatever other goofs behind all this. Doink Hogan panics and he runs back to Japan, but did you know that all this going back and forth to the east coast of Asia is actually adding more days to Hulk Hogan's year? Doesn't matter though, because this isn't really Hulk Hogan. Or is it? Brother! You'll face more generic wrestlers here in Japan, and you then realise that this story mode is seriously padded out. Wrestling nobodies is fine at the start of story mode, but it shouldn't be happening this late in the game. Eventually, the phenomenal AJ Styles shows up in Japan, and you're going to beat the phenomenal fuck out of him in order to continue story mode. Samoa Joe stands at the entranceway after the match, and look at that face. My god. So, was Samoa Joe the big shadow man, or was it someone else? You head back to the States, gaining more days on the Hulk Hogan calendar. Big Nash sends a message that you just show up to wrestle. You do not go into the locker room for any reason at all. You're thrown straight into an Ultimate X match against another jobber and another one. The good thing about this though is the fact that it lets you develop a strategy for Ultimate X, and the winning strategy is actually pretty simple. Just back off when the opponent goes for the X, let him start the mini game, then kick him off. Rinse and repeat until you win the match. So you end up going to the locker room because you just can't listen to good advice. Jeff Jarrett approaches Doink Hogan. He says, "At Bound for Glory, I can get a shot at the X Division title, but I'm up against Christopher Daniels and Samoa Joe. It's gonna look like a triple threat, but it's really a 2-on-1 match." Jarrett also mentions dumping Doink Hogan in Mexico if he doesn't do what he's told. So was Double J responsible for Sue turning into Doink Hogan? We get to the pay-per-view and Joe ends up attacking Daniels. Joe lets Hogan grab the belt, so Joe has joined up with Team Nash it seems. We go back to the locker room and Jarrett's standing there with LAX, and Double J calls Doink a dumbass. Apparently, I have to obey by Double J. He threatens to wreck Eric Young if Hogan doesn't fall in line, and we've even got a Polaroid of poor Eric gagged in some dirty old dungeon. Jarrett wants our hero to join the heavyweight division. I have to win the belt from Kurt Angle, and then I'm gonna drop it to Jarrett. Hogan can't tell Nash or anyone else for that matter what's going to happen, so now I'm a dirty, filthy heel. Jarrett gets our hero a match against Rhino. Yeah, he wants me to win the world belt, yet I gotta fight dudes like Rhino. Good idea, Double J. Nash is all annoyed that I'm hanging out with Jeff, but my god, someone needs to save Eric Young. Booker T's up next as the competitors now start getting a lot harder. The icon Sting even wants a piece of Doink Hogan as we relive Starrcade 97. The Monster Abyss steps up just to get knocked down, as does Christian Cage. And even though you try your best to avoid Nash and Joe, you just know that no good stinking hyena Double J is gonna make you fight your best buds. Kevin Nash takes a beating on Impact, Samoa Joe gets it at the pay-per-view, and finally we make it to Las Vegas for our title shot against Angle. LAX let us see more photos of Eric Young, and my, what are they doing to poor Eric? This is a man who needs saved ASAP. So we beat Kurt, we win the championship, and Doink Hogan's memory comes back. He remembers that he isn't really Hulk Hogan, he's a man named Sue, and he catches on that Double J and LAX are responsible for dumping him in a ditch in Mexico. So Double J arranges a meeting in the middle of the ring, and he says we've got to drop the belt or Homicide and Hernandez are going to mess Eric up. Sue speaks and Jarrett realizes that this isn't Doink, but rather the guy he dropped off in Mexico a few months back. So the fight's on in the Impact Zone. Double J does not mess around. His stats have been boosted to a seriously unfair level, but you'll pull through and you'll pin Jarrett to beat the game. Sue told Joe and Nash what Jarrett did to Eric before you met Double J in the ring, so our boys went and saved our damsel in distress while you took care of Jarrett in the ring. Honestly, story mode was dragging slightly, and it's a good thing it wasn't any longer. But there you go, TNA Impact story mode completed. Finally, let's take a look at some extra features in the game. Here's the Create a Wrestler mode that I know lots of people would be interested in. I always make a point to say that I'm no expert in Create a Wrestler, and all I really judge this on is the amount of items available for customization. And there's not a terrible lot if I'm honest, but I'm sure others could get creative. Just make Doink Hogan and you're grand. The TNA Extras section's pretty good though. AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels, Jay Lethal and Samoa Joe will teach you how to play the game. And yes, the guys provided voiceovers. Also in the extras, you can check out some exclusive behind the scenes videos that are actually quite in depth. You can check out the whole roster and learn a little about the superstars you unlocked. And then you've got a TNA highlights section where you can watch some full matches. Yeah, a couple of matches have been included from start to end, and that's a nice bonus. All in all, you can tell this game was at foundation level. If this was going to be what future TNA games were built on, then I'd say the future was looking pretty bright. The gameplay does become limited, and you eventually learn how to win matches fairly easy. The more you play, the more you can exploit the CPU, and it does make things a bit repetitive, but improvements could have been made with future releases. 2 players probably a blast on TNA iMPACT. I don't know, no one wanted to play this when I owned it, to be honest, and I still have my copy to this day. But even if someone did fancy a few matches, they really would need to take time to learn some controls. It's not as pick up and play as the SmackDown games at the time, so you're gonna have more fun playing with someone else who also got sick of destroying the CPU. TNA iMPACT, in my opinion, definitely does not deserve the harsh criticism it receives. Could sequels from the same developer improved on what was offered the first time around? You'd like to think so, but unfortunately there was no true sequel, and instead TNA fans got an updated handheld port for the Sony PSP and Nintendo DS. TNA iMPACT crossed the line. These handheld games were published by South Peak Games, the guys who acquired the exclusive rights to publish TNA games when Midway LA filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and in the very near future I will cover both handheld ports in an upcoming video. But that'll do it for this one. I'd recommend TNA iMPACT if you're looking for something a bit different. It won't blow you away with deep gameplay, the controller layout feels a little messy when you first play it, but you can do way worse when it comes to wrestling games. Brother. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.
But the beat goes on, you better lose yourself in the music the moment you own it, you better never let it go. You only get one shot, do not miss your chance to blow. Opportunity comes once in a lifetime. You better lose yourself in the music the moment you own it, you better never let it go. You only get one shot, do not miss your chance to blow. Opportunity comes once in a lifetime. You better games, I'ma change what you call rage. Tear this motherfucking roof off with 2 dogs cage. I was playing in the beginning, the mood all changed. I've been chewed up and spit out and booed off stage, but I kept rhyming and stepped right in the next cipher. Best believe somebody's paying